Good morning everyone and welcome to the class. We are doing the chapter The Making of the National Movement 1870s to 1947, and under this chapter we are doing the working of the Congress in the first 20 years of its establishment. And we have seen that at that time we can see that there were two different groups within the Congress. The one group was called moderates. The moderates were those who believed in this parliamentary politics, who believed that the British government should should improve itself according to the demand of the people of India. And on the other hand, we see that these radicals were there. The radicals were those people who advocated mass mobilization. They didn't believe in parliamentary politics, and they didn't believe in meetings and giving petitions to the British government. Instead, they believed in mass mobilization and boycott of British institutions and goods. And the prominent leaders of this radicals were Lal, Bal and Pal. And the third type of we can say group was also there, and this group believed in revolutionary violence. They wanted to overthrow the British rule, and in order to overthrow the British rule there should be this use of violence. Then only the British can be removed. And we have also seen that now in the year 1906, this All India Muslim League was established by a group of Muslim landlords and Nawabs. And this came as the party of Muslims, and the league by this time this partition of Bengal has also taken place, because we have discussed in 1905 Bengal was partitioned. So Congress was opposing this partition of Bengal, but Muslim League was in support of partition of Bengal. Not only this, it also demanded separate electorate for Muslims. We have discussed, I told you the meaning of separate electorate also. And we find that this demand was accepted by the government in 1909. And we find that some seats in the councils were reserved for Muslims who would be elected only by Muslim voters. This is separate electorate. And we find that this kind of system, the system of separate electorate, is such a system which divides the society on the lines of religion. And now with this starting of separate electorate, we find that politicians started to gather a following by distributing favor to their own religious group. They now people started to be divided on the basis of religion, because now there was separate electorate. So this was an attempt by the British government to divide the country. So first of all, we will see what are the important developments of this period, like 1905. Partition of Bengal. Then in 1906, and then separate electorate separate electorate for the Muslims was given by the British in the councils. And in the meanwhile, what happened that in 1907, the Congress was divided. The Congress was divided because there were different type of and the different group based on different ideology was existing in within Congress. As we have discussed, there were moderates, there were radicals. So the Congress was divided because the moderates they were totally against the use of boycott. They didn't believe in boycott, and they felt that it's a kind of use of force, boycotting the British institutions or the British cloth was actually use of force, and that is why they were totally against the radicals, and the result was the split in the Congress. And the Congress after this split, the Congress came to be dominated by the moderates, because now the radicals were not a part of Congress, so the moderates started to dominate it. And Tilak Tilak's followers, those who believed in radical objectives and radical methods, they started to function from outside, because Bal Gangadhar Tilak was the leader of the extremist group. So in this way the Congress splitted, and but this was not a very long lasting thing. But we find that in 1915 both the groups reunited in December 1915 at Lucknow session. And next year what happened, that the Congress and the Muslim League, they both signed a historic pact at Lucknow, which is known as Lucknow Pact, and they decided to work together for representative government in the country. That there should be the aim of both the parties is same. They both wanted that there should be representative government. The government should belong to the people of the country. So these are the important developments. 1905 Partition of Bengal, 1906 Foundation of Muslim League, 1909 separate electorate for the Muslims was given by the British in the councils. And now in between 1907 we find what happened. Yes, in 1915, this Congress was reunited. This number 1915, and then one more development, this 1916 Lucknow Act. Which was signed between Muslim League and Congress, and the purpose of signing this pact was that they both supported this idea of representative government. The government should be representative. They will work together for getting this objective. So this was Lucknow Pact, and now we find that this mass nationalism was started to grow. There were some important events took place which caused this growth of mass nationalism. Okay, so we find that the year 1919 was very important, because after this year we find that the struggle against British rule started to grow and as mass movement. In this mass movement, peasants, tribals, students, women, factory workers, they all were involved. That is why we are calling it mass movement. Mass means that crowd in which people belonging to different class and groups are together. It's not that only peasants were fighting against the British government, or only tribals were fighting, or only students were fighting, but we find that it became as a movement in which all the different sections and groups of society took part. So we find that there is some reason why this kind of mass movement started after 1919. So we see that there were some reasons for this starting of mass nationalism, starting of mass movement. So what were the reasons for this growth of mass nationalism? Okay, so the first, you can see what was the major event of this time is First World War. The period of First World War was from 1914 to 1918. Okay, so we find that First World War was very much responsible for some very important economic and political consequences in India. First of all, we find that because British were involved in First World War, so what happened that the defense expenditure of government of India increased manifold, and because the government and because the expenditure of the government increased, so how the government will compensate? The government will compensate by increasing the taxes. So that happened, that the government increased taxes on income and business profits. So it has an adversary. It has an we can say adverse impact on Indians. So not only this, we find that on the one hand there was increase in there was rise in the rate of taxes. On the other hand, we find that there was rise in the demands for war supplies, and because of these there was sharp rise in prices also. And this became one of the most important reason for discontentment among the people, because the price rise was greatly impacted the people. And what we find that the business groups were in profit from this war, as we have studied earlier also, when that chapter, this iron smelters and factory owners, we have seen that in both the industry, like cotton textile industry, or we see the iron and steel industry, but we find that these industries benefited. They were benefited by this First World War, because the demand for their goods increased, and also business groups were in benefit. They were getting profit from the war. And we find that because the imports were declined, imports from Britain was declined, and so whatever was produced in India, that the demand for that produce increased, and the Indian industry expanded very well during the war. And Indian business group, they were also in a good advantage, but it was not an advantageous condition for the common people, because of increased tax and because of high increase in prices of common commodities, common goods. Okay. And the impact of war was that the British, now they have to expand their army. They needed more and more soldiers for in order to be in the World War. So now they pressurized the people, especially the villagers, to serve as soldiers. And we find that a large number of soldiers were sent to serve abroad, because the war was going on, and for the purpose of this there was need of so many numbers of soldiers. And these soldiers were recruited from the villages of India, the peasants of India, and they were sent to abroad. And we find that there were many soldiers who were killed in the war, who belonged to India, and there were many who returned also after the war. And now they have an understanding of the ways in which imperialist power were exploiting the people of Asia and Africa. This was very much important, because when the soldiers from India went abroad, and they were fighting for British, they came to know that it was the wealth of India which was a great source for Britain. Britain is actually, they came to know that Britain is actually on the basis of resources of India is gaining so much power. So behind the power of Britain, what was lying? The resources of India. And how exploitating this system was, the colonial system was. They found in those countries democracy was established. So in a way we can say that this type of thinking is very much important in order to be free, in order to get strength to fight against the colonial rule. till now it was the opinion of the people that the British are very powerful. But now when these soldiers were there in abroad, and they were fighting for Britain, they came to know that the power of Britain depends very much on the resources of India. So this gives you strength to fight against the colonial power, and they also came acquainted with the democratic principles and ideology. So in this way we can say that First World War created dissatisfaction among the people because of so many reasons. So it was beneficial for the industrialist and the business groups. So this is all for today. We will continue with this in the next class.